What the fuck did I just watch? What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. This is Leo's Nerd Talk, and today we're going to be going over 28 years later. So let's get into that. Hi, my name is Leo, and if I talk about movie, TV show, video game later, or just anything nerdy, you are in the right place. And like I said, today we are talking about 28 years later. So without further ado, let's get into the review. Now, 28 years later is, of course, a sequel to the 28 days and 28 weeks later, where we get back Danny Boyle and Alex Garland to come back from the original movie to produce or direct this movie as well. And this one was an interesting one. But before I give you my thoughts about this movie in its entirety, let me know what you guys thought about it in the comment section down below. Join the conversation. I'd love to hear what you guys thought about this movie. This seems like one that might be pretty decisive, or pretty divided in terms of whether people liked it, didn't like it. For the most part, I see a mixed bag from people that I watch as well of what they think about the movie. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into my thoughts, and we'll start off with the pros. Starting off with the pros, I think this is the best looking movie within the franchise. You have very, very beautiful shot choices with this great set of these giant landscape greenery and mountains and the beautiful night skies where you have amazing shots of them running back over this like bridge over the water, and the night sky has all these stars and nebulas in the sky. It looks absolutely gorgeous for sure. Without a doubt, this is the best looking movie. Obviously, over 20 years from the original movie coming out, you don't really have that grainy filter over it. You don't have that kind of amateur style in terms of the filmmaking. This definitely feels a lot more polished. While certain things may not work for me, which we'll get into later, you can definitely tell that this was made by a couple of people or a group of people that have a much more understanding, have more experience when it comes to filmmaking. I also thought this movie was very ambitious, which I can always applaud. I can always applaud when someone wants to go for a certain idea. Again, whether or not it works for me, you, or whoever is watching the movie, that's always up to debate. But I can always appreciate when someone wants to take a point, a plot point, and put it on screen. It has the balls to do so and just have such a big, ambitious movie. So that's always nice to see, where you have writers, directors, producers going for something that they want and experimenting in terms of their movies. Also, another thing that I very much enjoyed within the movie is I like that they do start to kind of expand the lore of what is going on with this virus, where, as we know, these aren't your necessarily traditional zombies. They're not reanimated or the undead per se. They're more just infected people with what we already come to know as the rage virus. And we've seen it in the past, couple of movies, where even when someone gets infected by the rage virus, you kind of still see a slight kind of humanist side to them, where they kind of know what they're doing. They have like a thought process. They think before they act sometimes, depending on who is the actual infected person that's attacking. But we see that a heck of a lot more in this movie, where the infected kind of feel like more of a cult, where you have a group that is living out in this like wilderness area. You have a very great introduction to a new type of infected that I don't believe we've seen before, but the alpha within the group, who seemingly is able to communicate with the other infected and kind of tell them what to do, when to attack, when to not attack, how to be very sneaky. He's very quiet, brooding. Like, they even say that in the movie that the rage virus to certain infected kind of acts as like steroids, where it makes them like these huge brooding monsters. They become a little bit taller and they're muscular, and the strength that they have is a lot more than your traditional infected. So I like that they're introducing new types of infected within the universe. So it's very interesting to see the kind of evolved infected, where they are becoming a lot more smart, a lot more aware, where they're kind of running in packs. It's not so much just a rage filled, no kind of end game. It's just all about killing and killing and killing. Now it kind of seems like after all these years, they've learned to kind of communicate with each other. They know what they want to do. They attack in packs. They know how to search and hide and be sneaky, when to not attack, when to attack. So I like that we started to expand a little bit on the lore in terms of that. And the alpha is not the only new kind of addition that we get to the infected. We get two more that I would consider two different variants. One of them is kind of more of the like the bloater type of infected that we kind of see sporadically through different zombie iterations. But it basically is kind of like the one that's a lot bigger, a lot fatter. And I like the way these bloaters kind of look. Very sluggish, the way they crawl on the ground, but once they feel like that rage and they want to kill, they're still able to stand up and run at you full speed for the most part. And then there's this other one, which I don't know if I want to explain it because it's a very interesting moment. So I'll probably leave the third one out, but it's another thing that I would consider being a different variant, which leads to a very interesting point and a very interesting topic, and a very interesting way where they can possibly expand on that a little bit later, and what it kind of means to be infected, and how the infected like human species, if you will, or the ecosystem within the infected, how it kind of works. So it's a very interesting thing to kind of see, and I wonder if they are going to expand on that a little bit later if they end up making more movies, which I think they are going to. I think this was greenlit for a trilogy. We'll see on that. I'm not sure how it's going to go after this movie, but if they do expand on that specific one that I'm talking about, it would be very interesting to see how that kind of system works. And lastly, like I kind of already started talking about, there's a lot of interesting ideas in here. There's the idea about death and celebrating the death and learning how to remember the people that passed on, learning to remember that we all have to die. There's a lot of interesting topics that they try to explore in here. And it all just comes out to be very ambitious, a great test of what these producers, directors, and screenplays writers can do with a movie like this, where it does expand a little bit more and it has more of a human nature to it. Instead of being just so focused on the rage virus infected, it definitely feels like it's trying to focus more on the human nature, the human mind, how we perceive different things. So it brings in a lot of new interesting ideas to the franchise that we never really got before in this kind of way. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into my cons, and I kind of have a lot to uncover here. The biggest thing I think is that this movie definitely feels kind of incomplete. It feels like they didn't really know where they wanted to go, or if they didn't know where they want to go, this is more of a setup movie for the future films in the franchise. Because this movie feels a little bit over convoluted, so many different plot points that they kind of scrambled all into one film. We have the beginning of the movie that obviously we have like our cold open that introduces a certain character that we may or may not follow up with later on in the future. And first and foremost, that cold open that we typically get in the 28 franchise, probably the weakest one, didn't feel as intense as the other ones. Definitely doesn't live up to the intensity of how crazy these rage infected people can get. But beyond that, you get introduced to a couple of characters there, and then we obviously jump in 28 years later after that initial outbreak, and we get this kind of father-son relationship. And I kind of can relate it to, if you guys ever played God of War, Kratos and his son Atreides, where the dad is obviously this person that's experienced a lot of different things in his life. He knows the hardship and he wants to teach his son to be strong and not be afraid of anything. So you have this really tough love kind of father within Aaron Taylor Johnson. But one thing that kind of gets me is that I love Aaron Taylor Johnson as an actor, but in this movie, he just wasn't really likable. There was no thing that you can really relate yourself to this character. Nothing you can attach yourself to this character, because overall he's not a great person per se, and but again, you get this father-son kind of relationship, and he's trying to teach his son how to be a survivor, how not to be scared of the infected. And that's obviously something that you would want a father to do in a world like this, where all is just trying to survive, trying to live, learn how to desensitize yourself to what the world is going to bring at you. And you get all that, but you never get like the loving side, really. You never get the loving side where you feel like, oh, he doesn't necessarily care for his kid and he loves his kid. It just feels more of a, survival instinct type of relationship. And then we get the kind of big plot point within this father-son relationship where something happens that kind of tests that relationship between each other, and we never explore it again. It's a very interesting thing, and you kind of go like, oh, I wonder how that is going to affect this other thing. What is going to be the domino effect of the kid seeing what he saw? And then we don't explore it. We don't explore it so much so that we really don't see Aaron Taylor Johnson for the second half of the movie. And the trailers feel like they heavily kind of leaned on him being kind of like the main character, and he's, for the most part, barely there. And you really don't care for him. At least I personally didn't feel like it was a character I can really attach myself to or really care for. And then we get into kind of like a second plot point where this little kid, Aaron Taylor Johnson's wife, is sick, and this kid wants to find a doctor for her, but there's no doctor on the island that they're on, and they have to go out and try to find one. And that portion of the movie, which takes up, the big majority of the entire film or entire runtime, ends up being kind of pointless. It didn't lead to anything. It didn't go anywhere. It was just the most straightforward, let's walk to this spot that I know the doctor is at type of kind of portion of the movie. So again, you don't really invest yourself in it. And during this whole time, there's barely any infected. There's barely any feeling of risk from the infected. There's no intensity. The movie ends up not feeling like a traditional horror film that the other two have felt like. And then again, once we get to the resolution of this kid wanting to take his mother to a doctor, it ends up being pointless. And there's not much there. There's not much there going on. And all that kind of setup kind of leads into the third thing of, knowing that you have to die, and the realization of that, and the remembrance of the people that passed on with the doctor character, who I think is pretty interesting. Probably one of the better characters in the entire movie, a very interesting character for sure. But again, it ends up just all being kind of pointless. And this is where this movie just feels so confusing. There's not at least for me, it doesn't feel like there's a clear central through line trying to connect all these plot points to a specific message or to a specific moment in time that will set up a sequel. There's not that thing keeping this whole movie attached together. And then we get to the end sequence, which completely tonally just changes what this movie is. It just absolutely blew my mind what the final scene of this movie was, and it just didn't really make sense. We get introduced to a character that we've already seen before, and it just doesn't make sense. It's just so weird, so off-putting. It might work for some people, but at least for me, it was the final moment where I was just like, what the fuck are we watching? I don't get what they're trying to do with this. And it's tough because the entire time I'm watching the movie, there's things that I like, and there's things that I'm like, I don't know if that works for me. And there's also things where I'm like, yeah, that definitely doesn't work for me. But the thing that doesn't work for me is like different shot choices, the change in the tone, the changing in what the plot point we're trying to follow is. And it's one of those movies where it's like, I think I need to watch it again to fully kind of get my opinion together and my thoughts all together, because it was just so weird. But at the same time, I don't want to spend another 2 hours watching this movie right now. And it's weird because I can't tell people that this is necessarily a bad movie, because it's not really bad. It just doesn't live up to what 28 days and 28 weeks are. There's, for me, hardly any horror in this movie, hardly any intensity. The infected don't feel like too much of a threat besides like the alpha. And it's just such a roller coaster of what they're trying to explore. So I end up just kind of feeling a little like this whole movie is just mixed. You know, if someone tells me, "Oh, should I go watch it?" I would be like, "Yeah, go watch it," but go in expecting to leave confused or expecting to leave like you didn't really gathered everything that was trying to happen. You know, don't expect a 28 days, don't expect a 28 weeks later, because that is not at all, at least for me, what you're getting in this movie. This is a completely different film to what the other two films do. And, you know, I know some people might say, "Oh, you probably just don't get the movie." And maybe I don't. Maybe I don't get what they were trying to do. But I feel like I had a decent understanding of what they were trying to do, and just the execution was just so all over the place, so tonally different, where I just left disappointed. I was so excited for this movie, but I left disappointed. I left wondering again, what the fuck did I just watch? And it's a movie that maybe I'll watch again. I don't know. It's hard to say right now because I didn't find myself enjoying it. Like, I didn't like the movie, but I respected what was going on at the same time because it was ambitious, but the ambitiousness didn't work because it was so all over the place. It's tough. I don't know. It's tough. It's one of those movies that really baffled me, and I can go on and on about how weird this movie made me feel, and I wish there was more. I wish that it did more, but it just didn't work for me. But I can't say that it was necessarily a bad movie. I don't know. But that is going to be it for this one, guys. Let me know what you guys thought about 28 years later in the comment section down below. What else we'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Let me know if I'm just completely wrong and I'm missing something. I would love to know, because some of you guys are, bigger movie buffs than I am. And if you guys saw something that I completely missed, I would love to hear it, because I wanted to love this movie, but I just couldn't. It just wasn't what I wanted. So anyways, let me know what you guys thought about it in the comment section down below. And again, if you guys like talking about movie, TV show, video game related, or just anything nerdy, you are in the right place. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you.